So let's talk about something that affects every single one of us. What does it actually mean to be an adult? And maybe more importantly, who gets to make that call? We're about to dive deep into how the modern state has kind of taken over the job of defining adulthood and the huge, often hidden ways that power shapes our lives. All right, let's get into it. Okay, let's just start with the big question right out of the gate. When does someone truly become an adult? I mean, is it when you get a driver's license at 16? Is it when you can vote at 18 or drink at 21? Or is it something else entirely, something deeper that you can't just mark on a calendar?
The source material we're digging into today puts forward a really powerful idea. It basically argues that adulthood isn't some kind of reward the government gives you. Nope. It's an essential, unalienable part of being human, just like your right to life and liberty. It's something you are, not something you need permission to be.
Now, let's unpack that a little. The thinking goes like this. A right is unalienable if it can't be taken away or sold. And you can't really have rights like life and liberty if you're not seen as a moral agent. You know, someone who can make their own responsible choices. So, if those rights are unalienable, then adulthood itself has to be too. This is really the core of the whole argument.
And here's where the problem starts, according to this perspective. When a government sets up this crazy maze of age limits, permits, and licenses just for you to access freedoms you should already have, well, it's essentially taking something natural, your adulthood, and turning it into a regulated product, a product that it controls and can even charge you for.
This whole situation creates what our source calls two competing worlds of adulthood. On one side, you have literally thousands of years of human tradition, and on the other, you have this relatively new bureaucratic model from the modern state. And as we're about to see, these two are in a serious conflict. And man, when you see them side by side, the difference is just stark. The religious or spiritual idea of adulthood is ancient, it's organic, it's connected to real-life things like biology, your family, your community. But state adulthood, that's recent, it's administrative, it's just a patchwork of numbers, 16, 18, 21, driven by things like insurance policies, military needs, and political lobbying. Totally different worlds. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. You can see this pattern across countless cultures for thousands of years. From the Jewish bar mitzvah to the Islamic concept of baligh at puberty to indigenous vision quests, the pattern is so clear and consistent. Adulthood was understood to be a transition that happened in the early teens, and it was tied directly to becoming a morally responsible member of your community. So if the state is messing with something so fundamental, you gotta ask, what are the real-world consequences? This brings us to a really critical question. How does this power to define things actually create harm, even when the state says it's trying to do the opposite? The source material breaks this all down into three really distinct kinds of harm. You've got actual exploitation, manufactured exploitation, and manufactured victimhood. Let's take a look at what each one means. Okay, first up is actual exploitation. This is the stuff we all instinctively know is wrong. Things like grooming, coercion, manipulation. The point here is that these things are just morally wrong on a human level. They'd still be wrong even if there were no laws on the books about them. But then we get to manufactured exploitation. And this is where things get really twisted. This is when the system that's supposed to help actually creates the perfect conditions for harm to happen. The state steps in, saying it's the rescuer, but its own machinery is what's causing the problem. The source gives a powerful and honestly a pretty grim example here, the foster care system. A child gets taken from their home, and suddenly they become a source of revenue, funding for agencies, for providers. The system profits, while the child often ends up more traumatized inside the system, and then they age out with absolutely nothing. That right there is manufactured exploitation. The harm is a direct byproduct of this system itself. And the third category is manufactured victimhood. Now, this is different. This is when the state slaps the label victim on someone simply because they fit a legal category, like an age limit. This can happen even if the person themselves doesn't feel like they were harmed or exploited. The legal definition just steamrolls their actual lived experience. So this all leads us to the heart of the matter, to the source of the state's power. All of this is only possible because the state has grabbed the ultimate authority, the power to define the words we live by. And you really have to let this sink in. The state isn't a neutral referee just enforcing the rules. No, it's the author of the rulebook. It gets to literally write the official definitions of adult, child, victim, and abuse, and then of course it uses its power to enforce those definitions.
And having this monopoly on definitions gives the state an incredible amount of power. It gets to decide who has the rights of an adult and who is still a child. It can literally manufacture victims on paper to push new policies or get more funding, while at the same time it can ignore real, actual harm when it's just not politically convenient to deal with.
So where do we draw the line? I mean, is the argument for no government at all? Not quite. Instead, the source material makes a really crucial distinction between what is legitimate authority and what is just unconstitutional overreach. What's really fascinating here is this idea of separating two different domains. The state has a totally legitimate role in what we could call civil adulthood. Regulating public behavior like contracts, driving, and voting to keep everyone safe. But it crosses a line. It overreaches when it tries to define spiritual adulthood, which is all about a person's moral agency and their place in their community. And this quote right here just nails it. It really distills the core principle. The state's power has to have limits. It can regulate what we do in public, sure, but it has no business reaching into our conscience or our spirit to define who we are as moral people. So, here's the bottom line. The state's legitimate power is supposed to be about regulating conduct to prevent obvious, provable harm to other people. Its job is not to redefine what it means to be a person, an adult, or a moral being. That's the bright line between good governments and overreach. And this really illustrates the danger. When the state crosses that line, when it starts manufacturing harm with its own systems or creating victims out of thin air with its categories, well, the source argues it stops being a protector and it becomes something else entirely, a monster. Which leaves us with one last really important question to think about. In a world where the state claims the power to write the dictionary for words like adult, child, and victim, who in the end actually gets to define you?